Hello, I want to thank you for joining us for an update on the statewide local rapid recovery project recommendations for the town of North Brookfield. My name is Rhiannon Sinclair. I'm a city planner. I am joined by Abby Jamiel, who's also a city planner. We both work for a firm called Agency Landscape and Planning. We're at the final stage of the local rapid recovery process. After having conversations with community members, community leaders, and attending state-run workshops and learning sessions, we'd like to share recommendations that we've co-designed with you for North Brookfield's downtown. Our agenda for this presentation is to quickly review the local rapid recovery effort and key findings before diving into recommendations. Finally, we will reiterate next steps and questions we have for you. Over the next several months, the town of North Brookfield will be working hard to implement these recommendations. But we want to hear from you about what projects will be most successful and what projects should be prioritized from your perspective. So let's dive in. The local rapid recovery planning effort was created and orchestrated by the state of Massachusetts to understand the nature of COVID-19's effect on small businesses, to collect data, and then to respond with appropriate grants and funding. It was also an opportunity for cities and towns of various sizes to receive help from planning, economic development, and transportation experts to craft individualized plans for economic recovery. Our team consisted of members of the Agency Landscape and Planning firm, which is the consulting firm on the project, through which Abby and I are both working, as well as subject matter experts, Jeff Levine from Levine Planning Strategies, who really focused on issues of zoning, business recruitment strategies, and hiring for economic development. We also worked closely with Ethan Milad and Sheila Orsi, who are members of the Downtown Development Committee and important community liaisons. As we mentioned previously, this local rapid recovery effort had two main objectives. The first was to focus data collection on how communities have developed post-COVID or during COVID, and to understand the on-the-ground effects of COVID-19. This meant looking at the number of vacant buildings and business closures against traffic counts and pedestrian counts, as well as to help use this data to help inform the state's resource allocation strategies as it disperses aids to communities. The second important objective was to craft a personalized guidebook for each participating community with recommendations for projects. These recommendations are based on your specific needs to offset the effects of COVID-19 and to create more resilient small business networks for North Brookfield. The recommendations were formed through conversations with community members like you, responses from the small business survey, so all small businesses in North Brookfield had the chance to participate, through public participation or public presentations, as well as through the guidance of subject matter experts. This project followed a very fast timeline. Communities applied in December of 2020, and the project is wrapping up this month, October 2021. While we're in the final phase of the plan, the state of Massachusetts and all of the towns, including North Brookfield, will be working to implement projects that build back town centers, commercial districts, and main streets. I'll turn it over to Abby Jamiel, who's going to dig into the framework and recommendations.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here and to present on this project. So it's correct, there was, of course, a data collection framework through this effort. And the data collection framework was created by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and had four main parts or four main categories. The first was customer base, which observed demographic data and spending habits. The second looked at the physical environment, which looked at the condition of streets and street furnishings, parks, buildings, signage, crosswalks, and other elements. And there was a standardized rubric grading system for this particular data collection category. Then the third was the business environment, which observed the current mix of business tenants and shopping destinations within downtown. And then finally, it looked at administrative capacity, which observed the local network of organizations and small business support services, as well as available funding and business licensing and permitting regulations. Through this large data collection analysis, we came up with 5 key findings for North Brookfield's downtown. The first is that the private and public realm could be more welcoming. Downtown does feel a bit disjointed and seems to lack a cohesive vision. Second, despite the small size of North Brookfield, it does support very large businesses. So not only in terms of being an employer, such as through Vibram, but through the ability to sustain economic activity, like the big Hannaford's grocery store. So it does point us to the indication that the right type of businesses can do well in North Brookfield. Third, we found that residents are budget conscious and like to spend money on their passions or their hobbies. And often these include outdoor recreation or home improvement projects. We also discovered that the town is really well loved. Most people we spoke to spoke extremely highly of North Brookfield and were extremely passionate about wanting to invest and reinvest in its future and what that looks like. So that is an amazing thing to find out. Definitely gives us a lot of inspiration for the future. And then finally, our last key finding was that the townhouse itself is a really pivotal project. It not only represents the cultural aspirations of the town, but of course, being located downtown, it's such an important anchor, both economically, physically, historically, that is really the crux of what may be downtown's economic future. However, we know that there are a lot of plans and actions already in place for the downtown. So overall in our project, we nod to these. And of course, again, we mention how important the downtown is, but we don't have specific recommendations for the townhouse, just because we know that those are already underway. So that was all about the data collection, or part 1 of this effort. Part 2 of this effort, as we mentioned before, was about creating recommendations that are specific to North Brookfield. And these recommendations were based off of 7 categories. Those included administrative capacity, revenue and sales, tenant mix, which is essentially just a way to say what types of businesses and what size of businesses are downtown. The public realm, which are your parks, open spaces, streets and sidewalks. Your private realm, which are like the interiors or exteriors of buildings. Culture and arts, and then an other category. So not all of these categories have recommendations through North Brookfield, but they are the slew of possibilities that we had. So our first recommendation here is to create a downtown liaison or town manager position. People could really use a full-time person whose singular job is to take care of the downtown and economic development. So our suggestion here is, of course, to hire that person full-time. We understand that this may start on a grant-based system, and that liaison may be responsible for continuing fundraising for their own position. But our hope here is that if it's necessary, we could also share that position with neighboring downtowns if needed or desired, to alleviate either some of the financial burden or just to help and assist in creating a vibrant community with nearby towns. Next, we had a recommendation for revenue and sales. Create a tenant recruitment and retention program in line with the town's consumer capacity. Basically, this means bringing the right businesses downtown. So ones that are not only desired by community members, but fit their spending habits. And so for this, we understand that it's going to be a longer project within a 5 to 10 year process and come in phases. It's going to be our most expensive recommendation that we've offered so far, just because often identifying the right tenants and perhaps providing some policy incentives to get them in place may end up being expensive. So as we mentioned before, we are looking for the quote unquote right tenants that match North Brookfield. We are also looking to emerge from the pandemic with clear visions of what this strategy will be, and again, who we're looking for and why. Specifically with North Brookfield, we heard that creative industries, maker spaces, art galleries, a coffee shop, a bakery are all tenants that are highly coveted in the downtown. And what you see here on the right of the slide is a very high level breakdown of the types of customers that are in North Brookfield. This is, of course, just from one data source, but you can look here and identify that most of the consumers are budget conscious. And again, as we said, like to spend money on activities and outdoor hobbies. Moving on to the public realm, we suggested undergoing an identity and branding effort. And so what this means for a downtown can be anything as simple as creating banners that hang from light poles to organizing an entire branding, logo, slogan campaign. It really can run the gamut between all these different ends. And the reason why it's helpful to do this is to create a sense of arrival in downtown. So that way, if visitors are coming in, they understand this is a place to stop, this is a place to be. And if we're looking to recruit other visitors from nearby towns or within central Massachusetts, again, it's a really helpful way through just consistent imagery to produce marketing material, or again, as a way to brand the downtown as a place to go. We definitely recommend looking in existing buildings for color schemes, for different iconography or different graphic elements that may speak to North Brookfield. And the long-term goal for this strategy is to coordinate with nearby jurisdictions and towns for a larger local marketing and tourism effort, perhaps with all the Brookfields or Spencer or Sturbridge, or again, other nearby communities. And what COVID-19 has showed us in particular is that these marketing and branding strategies are really useful in more creative capacities. So here, with this example in Amherst, this marketing and branding, this cohesive strategy was used as a way to exemplify to customers that businesses are back, that they're open, and that they are safe. And not only was it a way to graphically create guidelines of how to behave downtown, for example, spending or having 6 feet of distance apart, but as you can see in the top image, allowed ways for people to somewhat interact with things that are normally static, like banners, like windows, perhaps empty storefronts. So again, this is another really helpful way to emerge from the pandemic and to use these strategies in particular. Great, and now I'm going to pass it back to Rhi, who is going to dive into recommendations for the private realm.
Thank you, Abby. As Abby shared earlier, the private and public realm could be more welcoming, and community members who engaged in public presentations agreed. Here, we want to share 2 recommendations that help North Brookfield's downtown thrive, and those are to amend the zoning code to allow for more flexible uses, and to channel certain types of funding sources into more private realm improvements. Today, North Brookfield's zoning code is specific about supporting traditional businesses, but it doesn't support trends in the same way that people experience downtowns. So to support new and diverse uses downtown, we propose amending the zoning code to allow flexibility in use and encouraging a greater business mix. That means, as part of our key actions, that we would want to streamline small use changes to the zoning amendments to ensure that we have that diverse mix of different business types, including more homegrown businesses or more craftspeople related businesses. It also includes opportunities to activate the more private spaces or spaces that often aren't considered as part of the public realm, which include alleyways and side streets. As you can see on the right, an example from another downtown where they took the alleyways that are typically used mostly for service or for parking and expanded those as multi-use or shared use spaces that support both pedestrian activity as well as lower rent spaces behind the main street where you have some of those higher rent spaces. Another key action is to ensure that the facades and building designs feel original and feel unique, while also preserving the historic character of the downtown. And last, creating a zoning 101 manual for private businesses and for public or private property owners to simplify and clarify the zoning code and ensure that everyone meets zoning code requirements. Our next recommendation is to channel creative funding sources into private realm improvements. North Brookfield's townhouse and several other downtown buildings really contribute to the quintessential New England character of downtown, but this character isn't consistent throughout. And investments in the private realm in buildings and in landscapes are uneven. So here, like the example in downtown Stockbridge, where they've preserved the character while also doing so with low cost improvements like standardized signage, lighting guidelines, and consistent landscaping, some of the key actions for North Brookfield can include some of those same ideas by standardizing storefronts or window displays, by encouraging beautification in downtown as a partnership between the city and property owners or business owners, and also considering form-based codes. So digging back into the zoning code and thinking about how a more focused formulaic way of thinking you can enable more of a downtown character to preserve that small town feel. And then last, we should take advantage of innovative funding strategies, thinking of organizations like Patronicity that help to support private realm investments through crowdsourced funds. So just a few examples of that, showing a little diagram of North Brookfield here. You can see the townhouse in the upper right corner. Just some small styles of investment can definitely go a long way. That includes things like allowing for sandwich boards within the zoning code, or encouraging cohesive signage that signal to a cohesive downtown identity. We can also consider lighting to draw attention to places like the townhouse as a cultural hub, and better, more pedestrian-focused scale lighting and crosswalks and other focused scaled investments that really bring people downtown and encourage them to stay. So here, thinking of some of those other ways that we encourage people to stay, expanding sidewalks to provide more patio spaces, as well as consistent landscaping through planting native flowers that really enliven or beautify the street, as well as really break down the scale and encourage vehicles to go a little bit slower, especially through this space. Also creating more spaces for people to sit, to people watch, to car watch, as well as to really enjoy the reimagined complete street along North Main Street. So also thinking about how the town can think about its culture and arts investments. So here we have two recommendations that really focus on how the town can partner to bring more public art into the downtown, as well as another investment in low-cost events. So more temporary types of public art, more temporary types of events to activate both School Street, Summer Street, and North Main. So here, the town has aspirations to be a creative destination, which came through both public presentations, through other conversations with friends of the townhouse, as well as in our work with Ethan and Sheila. So here, this first recommendation focuses on low-cost investments like temporary public art or murals, and engagement of resident artists in the creation of art that exemplifies how unique North Brookfield is. In order to do that, we really need to focus on partnerships. So there, it's not just about the town shepherding in these new artists and shepherding in funding. It's also a chance to identify potential arts liaisons at the state level or through nonprofits that help to facilitate an appropriate process for identifying sites for art installation, for working with property owners who might be interested in hosting a mural or public art, and then also to coordinate directly with the artist. Other key actions include identifying sites for public art in those larger kind of more mural spaces. So here in this diagram, you can see in blue what those spaces could be. Also, some moments of investing in kind of public art, not only in murals, but also in open spaces like the city's park right at the corner of School Street and Main Street, and in partnership with the church in the church's larger open space there, but partnering with the church, partnering with schools to create some of those temporary public art spaces. The next recommendation within culture and arts is to expand arts and culture through hosting events, either throughout the year, throughout a season, and partnering with those same groups that I just mentioned in order to create both long-term partnerships around the arts, but then also to ensure that everything is cohesive and facilitated, and invest in this space as a cultural hub. So some of the key actions here mean creating a cultural events calendar that really center on downtown, but are done in concert with businesses, with the Friends of the Townhouse and other cultural destinations like the library and religious institutions, to ensure that this calendar isn't just town hosted, but includes many of the events that happen throughout the town by others. And then the next key action there is to provide community activities and spaces throughout the year, especially in wintertime. We all know what New England winters can be like, but there are many ways that Massachusetts residents love to be outdoors. So finding wintertime activities to still engage or activate the various spaces downtown and bring more people to explore the shops and restaurants downtown. So I'm going to turn it over to Abby, and she will share a little bit more about partners and funding resources, and then we will end with a few questions.
Great, thanks so much, Rhi. So all of the previously mentioned projects cannot be done without help and very strong partnerships. So below here on these slides are just a list of some possible partners that we've identified throughout this process. Of course, there are many more. And if you know of any or you are part of those possible partners and want to get involved, we would love that and we would love to know. So please let us know at the end of the presentation. We will show you who to reach out to with any sort of feedback regarding partnerships. Additionally, we know that unfortunately projects need money. They need money to be implemented. Luckily, however, or perhaps one of the silver linings of the COVID-19 pandemic is that there is now once in a generation funding that is available not only to local municipalities, but specifically to industries like restaurant and retail that really have not seen federal funding in this scale, possibly ever before. So again, we have identified here just a fraction of federal funding that is available. And you'll see on the side, those little icons represent what recommendation category this funding is available for. So we can see that there is a whole plethora of public funding, but in addition, There are also private funding mechanisms which we can use, again, to fund these projects. And finally, we want to hear from you. Please tell us what you think about our recommendations. Which ones should we implement first? Which ones do you think will be the most effective? Who else should we speak with? Again, who are those partners that we just haven't been able to find? If you have answers to these questions and you would like to share, please reach out to one of our community contacts, Ethan Milad. His email, again, is Ethan, ETHAN, at miladstudioworks.com. That is MELADSTUDIOWORKS.com. And we thank you so much for inviting us into your community to be a part of this local rapid recovery project and program. We are excited for the future of North Brookfield, and we want to hear what you think.
Thanks, everyone.